Sablan, Tiro, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 2022 NMC Town Hall Forum. I'm Belul Solomon.
And I am Adam Walsh. We hope that over the course of this program, you will learn more about the candidates and what they hope to do for the future of the CNMI.
As we move forward, I'll start by explaining some procedures for the forum, which each candidate received ahead of time. Both candidates will have 2 minutes for an opening statement, 3 minutes for a closing statement, 4 minutes to answer each question, and 4 minutes to answer any follow-up questions. The timekeepers will be sitting in the first row. Candidates, when there's a minute left on your speaking time, the timekeeper will hold up a card that says 60 seconds, indicating that you have 60 seconds to finish your answer. At 30 seconds, the timekeeper will hold up a card that says 30 seconds. At 15 seconds, the timekeeper will hold up a card that says, you guessed it, 15 seconds. Please wrap up when you see the stop card. If you continue speaking after the stop card is held up, either moderator will give a verbal gesture and move on to the next speaker. A 15-second deduction may be given if you continue speaking after the moderator's verbal gesture. Personal references about other candidates are out of order.
Please note the cameras at the back of the room. This forum is being broadcasted live and can be accessed on the official NMC Facebook and YouTube page. Videos and photos are allowed from the audience, with the exception of flash videography and flash photography. Please remain quiet throughout the forum, no clapping, cheering, or calling out, with the exception that after their closing statements, you may clap for all the candidates you wish, if you wish. The questions for each issue or topic were randomly formulated and predetermined prior to the event. The candidates will receive 1 question per topic. The questions have been collected from the NMC student, employee, and faculty population. All of the questions have only been previewed by the Town Hall Forum Committee, which consists of the ASNMC officers and the appointed moderators. Questions will be presented by selected members of ASNMC. After the candidates answer a question, only the table will have the opportunity to answer or to ask a follow-up question to the candidate's previous answer. Again, after the candidates answer a question, the table here will have the opportunity to ask a follow-up question to the candidate's previous answer.
We will now start with opening statements of the candidates. You have 2 minutes for your opening statements. Candidates, your time starts now.
Buenas noches, Hilisao, magandang gabi po, and good evening to all. My name is Leila Fleming Staffler, and I am proud to be running with Christina Sablan. I'm proud to be her running mate and partner because I've always believed in her vision of good governance. She inspired me 15 years ago and many, many others by planting a seed in our minds that we should expect more from our government. We should expect transparency in how we spend public funds. We should expect fairness in the bidding process and timely payments to vendors and agencies. We should expect that equity exists for operation of services for all people who call this place home. Yet because of blatant abuses of power and influence, more and more people see the negative outcomes manifest in our community in the form of inequities. This mess has been caused because of a void of leadership that does not prioritize public service, but instead self-service. Tina and I pledge to pay attention to the details and ensure stakeholders, you the taxpayers, are treated fairly and that public funds are spent on public service and not private privilege. We pledge with our democratic partners to continue to lead by example with fiscal responsibility, honesty, transparency, and fairness as our guides. And with your help and your vote this November, we can make a difference.
Thank you, Leila, and Hafade, Tiro Faisho, Magandang gabi po, and good evening to all. I want to thank the Northern Marianas College and the associated students of NMC for hosting this important forum and giving everyone in this community a chance to hear from all of their candidates for governor. Leila and I are running on a campaign for good governance. We believe in the potential of these islands and the potential of our people, and we also know the problems. And we know that you deserve better, and you deserve a government that is worthy of your trust. That is what good governance means to us, and that is the kind of leadership that we will deliver.
Thank you, candidates, for your statements. Now we will move on to the question and answer portion of our forum. The first question has been given to the candidates prior to the event. The question is, what are your plans for giving immigrants who don't have U.S. citizenship or a green card the chance to receive financial aid so they can enroll in the Northern Marianas College and earn a degree? Your 4 minutes starts now.
I really appreciate this question, in part because I think it points to a value that is very near and dear to both Leila and me, and that is the notion that the rising tide lifts all boats, and that when we extend and expand opportunities for people who are without those opportunities, we help everyone in the community. I think we all know someone, maybe some of you are in this room, people who have lost status through no fault of their own. Maybe they're people who came in as children with their parents who were contract workers, and those contract workers, those parents have lost status, and these children grew up in our community and now want opportunities to seek higher education at NMC, or for that matter, at NMTech. And so we spent a lot of time thinking this over. I think one of the first things that we would do is support the passage of HR 560, which would give stability and relief to so many CWs and the families who have been in this community for so long. We also want to work with the local scholarship offices and private foundations which make financial aid available to consider expanding the definition of resident to include CNMI long-term residents who now have status under the previous legislation that Congressman Kilili, who's here today, helped champion in Congress, and as well as to people who would be eligible under the terms of HR 560 for that status. And then we've also talked about working with NMC and appealing to the leadership of NMC to extend in-state tuition for people who have established presence in this community and who have graduated from CNMI high schools to make them eligible for in-state tuition.
We definitely looked at other places where students who are not considered U.S. citizens were able to avail of different types of services like this, and the solutions that we found are comparable to the solutions that we read about. And so finding solutions to problems are always an issue, but it's something that we can definitely do. But we definitely know that everyone's situation is unique. But what we all have in common is that the CNMI is their home, is your home, is our home. And we want to help you become a contributing member to our community, because we know that education is what can break the poverty cycle. We know that education is what makes people have upward mobility so that they can provide more for their families. We all know somebody who has gone off to college and come home and have worked and changed the course of their whole family's lives because of the degrees that they have been able to get. And when they come home and give back to our community, that just makes us all the more richer, because we are building our local capacity. And if we can provide, GED opportunities for people to get their high school diploma, we should be able to provide pathways for people to get higher education, whether it's in the trades or at our local college. That is excellent and very affordable.
Thank you, candidates. The floor, or the table, is now open to follow-up questions from the students. Thank you. We will now move on to the next question pertaining to the topic of education.
I would like to call on the ASNMC representative to present the question.
Good evening, candidates. The question is, at the State of Education address, Commissioner Ada, CEO Atau, and President De Leon Guerrero agreed to improve the CNMI education system together. If governor, how might you and your office contribute to this cause?
Thank you for that question.
Your 4 minutes start now.
Thank you for that question. You can tell I'm excited to answer this, because I can definitely tell you that we've already begun the work with collaborating with all of these educational entities right now as we speak. One of the things that I've personally been working on really deeply with them is working on apprenticeships, connecting the dots for our workforce needs so that we can have pathways for our people, whether it's again in the trades or in university, college settings, so that they can find their ways into work. With respect to the collaboration aspect, we will definitely sign that kind of bill into law. We need to have legislation that establishes these relationships with the existing entities that we have. I want to thank Senator Edith for guiding me and my colleagues in our conversations with her experience as the Secretary of Labor in her previous career. And through those conversations and making sure that we have multiple stakeholders at the table, we can definitely make things pass in our legislature that will help all people, regardless of where they come from. It's important that we do that, because collaboration is the foundation in getting stakeholder buy-in for anything that's new, especially when we're bringing in change. Do you have anything?
Yeah, I also wanted to note that this legislation that Leila was just talking about is going to be introduced tomorrow.
Yes.
And I will be a co-sponsor along with our other colleagues in the House leadership. It's such an important step in the right direction, long overdue, and is itself the product of collaboration among all the different educational institutions that have a stake in this. Leila and I both recognize that education is the single most important investment we can make in our people and in the future of this Commonwealth, and also one of the most important economic drivers. And we are committed to realigning the resources that are available to boost up our educational institutions and facilitate these collaborative pathways so that everyone has access to opportunities, everyone has a chance to thrive and find their gifts and make a decent and honorable living and contribute to this economy.
Thank you so much, candidates. Are there any follow-up questions from the table? We'll now move on to the next question pertaining to the topic of the economy.
Good evening, candidates. The question is, under a looming financial crisis, what plans do you have to mitigate the economic harm that will affect our infrastructure, pensions, and schools?
Candidates, your 4 minutes to answer the question starts now.
Well, that's a huge question because we are already, I would say, in a financial crisis. And we know that from the delays in transfers of funding to critical institutions like NMC, like the public school system, like our hospital. We know that there have been delays in payments to vendors. And I think that the very first step is to get a real assessment of the fiscal condition of this government and make that report public to the people. And then the next step is to stop the bleeding. We are committed to principles of fiscal responsibility, and adhering to those principles, we are committed to leading by example. We know that there is a lot of waste in this government right now, and you know, we have these priorities for taking care of our retirees, meeting the Medicaid match, properly funding our schools and our healthcare institutions. A lot of priorities, but they have not really been made priorities, at least not in this current administration, and when we've seen these delays that I've spoken about. So those would be the first steps. Then I also want to note, though, that even as we are facing this very present financial crisis, there is still a lot of federal resources coming into the CNMI, huge windfalls thanks to the American Rescue Plan Act, thanks to the work of Congressman Kilili, the bipartisan infrastructure law, not to mention disaster recovery monies that have been made available to the Commonwealth. A lot of these projects are needed to assist with our economic recovery and to assist us in preparing for the events of future disasters. But these projects have been held up and are stalled, and we need to get those projects moving. Those would also be good for the economy and in building a more resilient community that can weather these storms that we know are going to be more frequent because of the climate crisis. So, these are big steps. We have plans, though, to get our finances in order, and I think also appointing people who are qualified and ethical and will embody the principles and values of good governance to lead our departments and agencies is also a really critical part of getting our finances in order and preparing for a future that is more prosperous and building for that.
I guess one of the main things that we talk about when we talk about the economy is when we combat public corruption, we stop a lot of the bleeding in that way, because public corruption steals from everybody. It's a cost of ethics, it's a cost of trust, it's a cost to the community access. And we see this time and time again. You've heard the stories of worker abuses, people not getting paid. All of those things are related to our top seat, who is the main enforcer of all, is the key enforcement authority for all government laws. And this is something that we would definitely do a very different job on, because we know that public corruption hurts all people from the top to the bottom.
Thank you, candidates. Are there any follow-up questions? Okay, we will now move on to the next question pertaining to the topic of healthcare.
Candidates, the question is, due to the increasing need for healthcare workers, especially nurses, how will you support the Northern Marianas College and its plan to expand the existing nursing program in offering a bachelor's in nursing?
Candidates, your 4 minutes to answer the question starts now.
Excellent. Well, I think that one of the main things that I know right now is happening is NMC needs to make sure that they have all of the match that they need to finish building the buildings that they have, so that they can have the programs within those buildings actually come to fruition. So at the very offset and start, we would try to make sure that those types of matches and funding requirements are something that we are part of a conversation of, and that we fund them in a timely manner, because that slows down the start of everything. And I would say that's one major area to start. But we'd also look into other areas possibly of encouraging legislation and within our colleagues in the House to work on possibly additional scholarships for students that are seeking that pathway. I know we recently passed a bill in my committee to offer scholarships for behavioral health sciences to increase the capacity of people who are seeking degrees in those areas. We can do the same thing for people seeking nursing certifications and all of that. And that's something that we would definitely support. I may sound like a broken record tonight, but education is the pathway out of a lot of problems that we have, and that's one of the best ways that we would invest in our community. So that's a good answer, an easy question, I think.
Yeah, great answer. And the only thing that I would really add to that is just how important collaboration is to both Leila and me. And so we would want to work with NMC and its leadership, and particularly its leadership in the nursing program, as well as with our healthcare institutions, to identify what is needed, what resources are needed, and how can we be supportive. And I was just thinking of that behavioral health scholarship bill that we're actually about to pass tomorrow.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, it went to the Senate, so it should be going to Governor.
Okay, so that should be on the way. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of I think opportunities for that kind of collaboration, and to make a bachelor's in nursing a reality here, which I think is a great idea.
Does the table have any follow-up questions?
Candidates, could you please elaborate on your particular or specific plan on giving these nursing program students a opportunity after their bachelor's, or after they finish their bachelor's degree?
So like the pathway to work?
Yes.
Okay.
Your 4 minutes starts now.
Thank you. And thank you for clarifying. I guess that would lead to more collaboration with the health CHC to make sure that we have maybe perhaps an apprenticeship program that is established within CHC and in partnership with NMC. I mean, I think that's definitely something we have to consider. Even before the bachelor's happens, we need to do that type of work, because having an apprenticeship pathway will make sure that people are placed in positions that are already existing and need capacity. I mean, I don't think it'll be that hard to fill the capacity that's needed at CHC, because they do have a need. But if we need more established systems, then I would definitely go with apprenticeships as one area.
Yeah, I would also want to mention the Marianas Jobs Now initiative that is part of our platform for workforce development. And it's not just limited to pathways for jobs in nursing, but really the idea, again, going back to this theme of collaboration, is to align all of the entities that are involved in education and apprenticeships and labor, and the employers who are looking for workers, workers with all kinds of skills, and to match people who are seeking either training or employment with the employers who need to fill these positions. And I think that the nursing would certainly be one of these critical areas, right, where we know that there is demand, not just in CHCC, but also in our private clinics. And so we would want to help match our local talent, build local capacity in the area of nursing with the employers that need nurses.
Thank you, candidates. We will now move on to the next question pertaining to the topic of social service and food insecurity.
Candidates, the question is, almost 90% of all our food is imported. As governor, what more can you do to support our local farmers and ranchers, and how can you incentivize growth in our much-needed agricultural industries?
Candidates, your 4 minutes to answer the question starts now.
Well, one particular game changer for agriculture is the Cagman Watershed Project, which Leila here and we in the legislature keep trying to fund to complete this project that has taken years and would make such a difference for farmers in the Marianas, and just in making water available to people. And I'm just going to throw that over to Leila to explain more. But in the Sablan Staffler administration, we will direct funding to complete this project. We will sign appropriation bills into law. It keeps getting vetoed, and that will change in our administration.
So the Cagman Watershed Project, it's not just about Cagman, it's for the entire island of Saipan. They just called it the Cagman Watershed. But basically, in 2003 and earlier, maybe you might remember a lot of flooding that was happening in the Cagman area. With the partnership of the USDA and NRCS, I hope I got that right. I sometimes mix them up.
Got it right.
But the NRCS, they've been working with our federal partners to solve that problem of the flooding that was in that area by redirecting the water. And this is a really unique project that would be a model in the Pacific once it's completed, which again, it's like 20 years old. But this water that's redirected would fill up the old quarry back there between the church between the church and the laundry. There's a quarry back there. It will be I think 10 million gallon reservoir that could be used for the farmers back there. Right now, if you're a farmer, you might not have water. It depends on what side of the Cagman farms that you are at. And that's something that is critical to give our farmers access so that they can continue to grow. Or there's farmers who've had their whole lots, inundated with too much water, and then they lose all their plants. And so this watershed project, which has been in process for over 20 years, it needs some critical funding, has been ignored by this administration. The USDA was ready to submit a new plan. They're ready to start, but that was since March, and they've been waiting for our administration to respond since March, and I talked to them in July. And all we need to do is sign a document so that they will say, okay, here's the plan, and let's start going. Because even the USDA wants this project to get off their books. It's part of the infrastructure bill that was passed, that was bipartisan in the Congress. And that is so critical for supporting our farmers. One other part of that is that the soil and water conservation districts have been inactive for the last several years. These are really critical funding sources for farmers. CNMI is one of 3 jurisdictions that have not participated in the grants that they could have been getting for the last 3 years since the pandemic. And that's just because we haven't had board members reappointed to these critical areas so that the feds will say, yes, you can have this money. A lot of these things that are being left to the wayside are taking away opportunities from our people and our farmers. And these are the kinds of things that Sablan Staffler administration will prioritize, because we want to take advantage of all funding that we can from any source out there that is willing to help our people.
Well said. And I will only just add to that. You know, farming is hard enough. We were actually just talking to a former farmer in Cagman who told us that he gave up because water was such a problem, and the act of physically bringing water to your crops was such a burden, and the government can and should play a role in easing that burden so that farmers have the best chance of success, and food security is also supported in this Commonwealth.
Thank you, candidates. Are there any follow-up questions?
Thank you for your answer, candidates. Aside from the Cagman Watershed project, what other ways would you support our local farmers and ranchers and to incentivize growth in our agricultural industries?
So collaboration is going to be the theme of this night. We have a ton of resources, like technical assistance, resources and services that are available to help agricultural producers start up their businesses, establish their farms, you know, in agriculture and aquaponics, also in fisheries. NMC is a huge, huge resource. And NMC CREES in particular, we have Lands and Natural Resources, the Division of Agriculture. Who am I missing? The Small
BDC.
Business Development Corporation. You know, there are, I think that the key, commerce for that matter, we can bring all of these resources together to talk to each other, collaborate, connect them with farmers and aspiring entrepreneurs, and make the technical assistance, the research, the marketing assistance that they would need to really succeed and thrive in their businesses, and connect them also with the buyers. So the public school system is a huge customer. You know, they have to provide lunch and breakfast to 10,000 children every day, and they need a stable supply of food, and they want local produce. You know, the local restaurants and hotels connecting, and markets and grocers, you know, we can connect them to the people that are producing these, you know, agricultural produce or aquaponic products for that matter. I'd also like to see these resources aligned to help producers also get into more value-added products, so that these goods can be made available for local markets as well as for export. There's a lot of opportunity for that, and again, there are the programs and the resources that are here now, and the expertise, and I think we could do a little more to make them talk to each other and then connect them with the people that are in need of these services.
Yes, when you talk about value-added products, it makes me think of how many people I know that went on keto, right? And how many people were looking for alternative sources of flour. We can make flour. We can make breadfruit flour or coconut flour. We have these things. We can grow them here. We just need to get to that next step. I mean, we have that breadfruit plantation, but I haven't heard about where the machine is going to be to make the flour for that. But I think that was supposed to be one of the plans. But seeing these plans all the way to the end is really important, and that's something that we would make sure is a priority for our administration.
I also wanted to just quickly note, with the time that we have left, that there is huge potential specifically in the hemp industry.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a lot of interest, especially among young entrepreneurs, in getting into becoming hemp producers and growers and becoming licensed. But there are also these barriers that we've created, and I think that this government, and certainly our administration, will provide the leadership to see how we can ease these legal barriers that currently exist, get some clarity, particularly for you know, other cannabis growers and people who want to get licensed, to understand the intersections between federal and local law, and then also provide facilitate access for farmers and producers and sellers in the other islands, right? There's, you know, there's so many potential applications for hemp in particular, and fewer legal barriers, but other resources that I think aspiring entrepreneurs and developers might need to connect with more, and we have the resources to do that for them.
Thank you, candidates. We will now proceed with our 15-minute intermission. Everyone is now allowed to get up, stretch their legs, use the restroom. We'll start the second part of our town hall after this short break. Thank you.
Hey. All right, thank you. Cheers.
Welcome back, everyone. We hope you all had a nice break. We'll proceed with the second part of our forum, and the next question is pertaining to the topic of public safety.
Candidates, the question is, in 2022, there have been at least 300 mass shootings in the United States. While we've had limited instances of gun violence, specifically gun violence in our schools, what are your plans to secure our schools to ensure the safety and protection of our students? Candidates, your 4 minutes starts now.
Well, I might like to start with this one. Having been a school administrator for over 13 years and a teacher for over 20 years, I definitely find this topic really near and dear to my heart. Sorry, that's a deep question. Well, one of the things that I know that has already been happening in schools is that they do a lot of safety drills. These safety drills are important, so it makes students and the staff and everybody that's on a school campus know what to do in the event that there is an emergency, especially something like that. I feel that this topic is something that we've been preparing for since these types of things began almost 20 years ago. And that's something that we would continue to support is these types of drills and continued collaborations with the public safety agencies that are also there to help protect our entire island, but especially our schools. I know that we have gun laws that have changed in our community, and that is a concern with respect to the type of access that people have. And that's something that we would definitely have to look at as far as other ways that we could provide, I want to say, more awareness for gun owners in keeping their units safe from being taken without their permission or used in an inappropriate way. That's something that we could definitely do more of in our community because of the fact that those gun laws have only recently changed. Having more opportunities for training for our community so that we can protect them from these types of accidents, possibly, through people taking their guns without permission. And I think that's where I would start, maybe.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. I think we also need to recognize gun violence in our country as a public health problem, and treat it like the epidemic that it is. You don't see gun violence of this scale and this frequency in any other developed country, really. And here in the CNMI, we have actually some of the strictest gun safety laws in the whole country. But the gap that we see is in education and awareness about what those laws entail, even among law enforcement officers. There is a lot of confusion about what these laws mean and how they should be interpreted and enforced. And I think I would also want to start there, is making sure that our law enforcement officers and then gun owners and members of the community are aware of the requirements. If you want to take advantage of the right to bear arms, it comes with responsibilities to be educated about the law, and the government has a responsibility to make that education available. I would also say that we can do a lot more to make mental health services more robust and more available. We have introduced and passed unanimously in the House and Senate, for example, legislation to make telepsychology available through the Psychology Interstate Compact. That has been vetoed. We are poised to override that veto in the House tomorrow.
Thank you, candidates. Does the table have any follow-up questions?
So you mentioned, you mentioned drills, you mentioned spreading awareness and educating gun owners. So aside from those, what are other ways that you can ensure and secure our schools to ensure the safety and protection of our students, aside from what you mentioned?
Candidates, you may now answer the question.
Well, I think that there are some efforts underway now to improve school safety, right? And Leila perhaps could speak to this even more than I could, but with the assignment of school resource officers, for example, from the Department of Public Safety, I think one way to improve security at our schools is to make sure that all of our school resource officers have the training that they need to respond to active shooter drills. I mean, what we saw in Uvalde in Texas was horrifying, and there were, police officers that were assigned to support security and safety of those students in that school, and there was a huge failure at all levels in that response, and we can and we should learn from that and make sure that nothing like that ever happens in this community, and that our school resource officers have the support and the safety gear and the training that they need to protect our schools. My understanding also is that our schools have adopted measures to improve like the physical security of their campuses, whether through fencing and security, other security measures to better control who has access to the school, who can enter. We've had to learn some very hard lessons, I think, from the massive school violence that we've seen in this country, and we should apply those lessons here now and prevent problems before they reach our shores.
Thank you, candidates. We will now move on to the next question pertaining to the topic of drugs in the CNMI.
Okay. Candidates, the question is, if a law enforcement officer tests positive for drugs, for example, meth, marijuana, etc., what kind of punishment is the most appropriate? Should they still be employed? Your 4 minutes starts now.
Thank you for that question. Can you repeat it one more time?
If a law enforcement officer tests positive for drugs, for example, meth, marijuana, etc., what kind of punishment is the most appropriate, and should they still be employed?
Thank you. Well, one of the things we know to be true is that drug addiction is often stemming from past traumas. Trauma is the foundation of many reasons why people seek out drugs to have self-coping mechanisms. And so I don't believe that anybody in any position should be fired outright. I think right now our laws protect people from that, and they have to be able to be given a due process to be given drug treatment options. We believe that drug treatment is important for all people who are suffering from addiction to drugs and alcohol, because a lot of times, again, it stems from the traumas that they had in the previous. And of course, with treatment programs, there's sometimes time that needs to be taken, and so there's ways that these kinds of issues are dealt with already with providing access to the treatment, and also, I guess, a timeline to stay in the good light, if you will, by not testing positive. And we would believe in following that process. Maybe perhaps your question is specific to law enforcement officers. I feel that they are human just like anybody else and should be given the same access to finding a better path. Again, it's often the traumas that they've had that lead them to that place. And working in public safety, you're often exposed to these traumas as a part of your job. And so making sure that our public safety officers have access to mental health services, which is why that SIPAC bill is so important, because we already know that we don't have enough mental health services available to our people at this time, and having additional access through this would be something that's important, because it would help people on Tinian and Rhoda in addition to SIPAN, because SIPAC would be able to address people who need mental health services through an online program, and that's something that could help anybody who's dealing with addiction, whether they're a police officer or not.
Yeah, I think it also depends on the specific circumstances. So yes, absolutely, as a general principle, we would support due process and access to substance abuse treatment and rehabilitation services for anybody that has a drug addiction problem. But there is also a higher level of care and expectations that we should have of our law enforcement officers. And in cases where we know are a problem with the Department of Public Safety and the Department of Corrections, when officers are involved in, for example, smuggling contraband into the prison, or actually involved in dealing meth in our community, there really should be no tolerance for that. That is straight up corruption, that's an abuse of power, and we will take that very seriously and not tolerate that in the Sablan Staffler administration. And I think that problem itself points to bigger voids in leadership, bigger gaps in trust and abuses of power in our law enforcement agencies, starting at the very top.
Thank you. Are there any follow-up questions from the table?
Candidates, could you please elaborate on what are your plans to support and protect families who have members that have been affected by this drug abuse?
We believe that access to the drug treatment programs and rehabilitation services should be available to our people, and they are at this time in some senses, but we could probably see how we could support more access, because drug addiction can happen to anybody. It doesn't discriminate whether you are someone who is established or someone who's really struggling. And often it stems from the traumas that you have. So having access to mental health and having access to treatment programs are really important to helping families as a whole, especially if in a wraparound sense, where you can provide counseling for also the family members who are not suffering from drug addiction, but maybe from the effects of having a family member who is.
Yeah, we recently visited with some people who are enrolled in the substance abuse programs here on island, just to hear their stories. And without exception, every single person at that table said that they fell into drug addiction. Their gateway to drug addiction was trauma, whether that was an abusive situation at home, whether that was sexual assault, poverty. Like there were these traumatic experiences that led them down the path of drug addiction. And so drugs really are a coping mechanism, right? And it really does affect the whole family, and there are repercussions for the whole community. And we do need to invest in building up our systems and the services that are available to help people access not just drug treatment programs, but these wraparound services that Leila mentioned, because poverty was also a very common struggle that these people shared with us. They needed access to healthcare. A lot of them didn't even know how to apply for Medicaid, for example, or that they were even eligible. They needed help applying for housing. They were constantly worried about homelessness and education and connecting to employment opportunities. They had other needs and other needs affecting their entire family, really. And so our approach to supporting families that are struggling with substance abuse and drug addiction would be to provide the support for these resources that could help people break these cycles of trauma and break these cycles of poverty and addiction and get on pathways to a more thriving life.
Thank you, candidates. We will now move on to the next question pertaining to the topic of the environment.
Candidates, the question is, our beaches have been affected by climate change. What steps will you take to stop the rapid coastline erosion occurring in Sinamai?
4 minutes to answer the question starts now.
Wow. There are a number of steps that we can take, that we should take to protect our shorelines, and one is to look at the science. And there are studies underway right now to identify where we are most vulnerable along our shorelines. And there has been a shift away from hard infrastructure and seawalls and things of that nature, and a greater interest in a lot of communities that I think we could also consider here to consider more natural features that would be more protective of shorelines. And for example, like our mangrove forests and using natural features to help our shores recover, really, and to protect what we have right now. That's one step that I think we should consider. And then I think that we need to consider climate resiliency in everything that we do, in all of our planning, all of our development, certainly along the shorelines. We have a lot of FEMA projects that are still lagging since Typhoon Sotalor, and certainly since Typhoon Yutu. And these projects are meant to help us become more resilient as a community and be better prepared for the impacts of the climate crisis, be better prepared for future storms that would affect our shoreline and everywhere else on this island, right? And we need to get those projects moving, and we will make that a priority in a Sablan Staffler administration.
Thank you, candidates. Do we have any follow-up questions? Okay. We will now move on to the next question pertaining to the topic of work development.
Candidates, the question is, how would your administration ensure equity within the local workforce given the prevalence of nepotism in the CNMI?
Candidates, your 4 minutes to answer the question starts now.
Well, first of all, we would lead by example. We believe in opening up fair and equitable opportunities to everyone, in not just in the government, but across both our private and public sectors. And certainly in our administration, there are positions that are of critical importance to lead the departments and agencies that that implement the programs, deliver the services, and we would have the ability to appoint the department heads and appoint people to boards. And what's really important to us is making sure that we open up opportunities to everyone. And we will accept applications, for example. We will consider everyone based on qualifications. We will look for people who are ethical and are committed to public service and have a vision for where they want to lead the departments and agencies to deliver the services that we are committed to delivering in our administration. That's where we would start. And leading by example is, you start at the top. That's what good governance is about. And it ripples all the way down in this government. And we should expect that. That has to even be a question, right? That we all recognize that nepotism is a problem here. And we need to elect leaders who will make that change. And we'll say we will accept applications from everyone. Everyone will get a fair shot, whether it's whether it's for hiring for a job or for a contract. If you're a business, you also want to make sure that you have access to fair opportunities to bid for projects. And that will be one of the very first changes we make to instill this culture of good governance in our government. That is what you deserve.
We see your question also stemming from a lack of trust in our government services at this time because of the fears of the nepotism. And because it's such a prevalent theme, even when something maybe isn't, we still look at that, and we don't want any cloud of impropriety to be over us. And so we would start from the beginning all the way to the end with opening it up and making it a fair process for all. So if you're out there and listening and you have a passion and you have a skill that you want to give and you're willing to serve the people of the community of the CNMI, we hope that you will put your application in when we open it up, and that's what we will do. So look out for it. We're looking for you.
Thank you, candidates. Do you have any follow-up questions?
Candidates, how can you ensure that employers provide equity for the people applying any jobs, whether they are U.S. citizens, green card, long-term, or U.S. citizen? Or CW workers?
The Department of Labor, plays a huge role in being a champion for workers, or it could play a huge role with the right leadership. The CNMI Department of Labor in the past has been an advocate for workers, and we should make it that way again. Senator Edith, she's going to get another shout out in this room. But she showed by her example like what a Secretary of Labor can do to advocate for workers who were being abused by their employers. And even to this day, we see a lot of workers that are the victims of wage theft and other violations at the work site. And they're of all nationalities, right? And that needs to change. And what we will ensure in a future CNMI Department of Labor is leadership that values workers, that values equal opportunities in the workplace and safe working environments and the rights, upholding the rights of all workers. That's the first place I'd start.
Yeah. I don't know how to follow up with that. That says everything. I mean, truly.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, candidates. We will now move on to the next question pertaining to the topic of infrastructure.
Candidates, the question is, what kinds of urgent infrastructure projects will your government prioritize and why?
Your 4 minutes to answer the question starts now.
We only have 4 minutes?
There's so many infrastructure projects. I would start with clean water, clean, drinkable, running water from the taps. It's been this elusive dream for the people of the Marianas, especially the people of Saipan, for so many years, and it's never been a priority, really, in any administration. It will be in ours. And I'd like to give another shout out to Congressman Kilili Sablan for all the funding that he has directed to the Commonwealth to get us to the goal of 24-hour water, and now $100 million to get us to the goal of drinkable water, water that you can drink. Can you imagine that? I've lived on this island all my life, and I've never been able to drink water from the tap, just like you. And it's the year 2022. Clean water is so basic to public health. It's so basic to a decent standard of living. And it's about time that we have a government and a leadership that is committed to that. That will be one infrastructure priority, a huge infrastructure priority in a Sablan Staffler administration.
I guess energy, of course, would have to be another follow-up with that, because as we continue to see the rising cost of energy in our homes and our power bills, it's definitely something that's overwhelming. We have antiquated engines as we speak that are continually being fixed instead
Band-Aids.
of... Yeah.
Yeah.
And so many of those types of things we could do differently. We spend so much money on obsolete items just to keep them running when we could be investing in other things. And so that's definitely something we want to put more attention into, especially with renewables. We've seen how Guam has been able to change their energy production and switch to renewables in a way that makes their power only 11 cents per kilowatt hour. We could use that rate ourselves here because we are double that. We are some of the highest rates in the Pacific. And so that's something that our administration would definitely want to tackle. One of the things that's happening right now is that the PUC, Public Utilities Commission, has not had a quorum of their board since 2014. That is one of the main functions of this administration. And that is something that we would definitely put priority on, because the role of a board is to ensure the fiduciary duty of that entity. And right now there is no oversight, and there is no one looking to make sure that operations at our current utilities place are really at the most efficient that they could be. In any other place, before they raise your rates, they check and see, is everything in this operation as efficient as it could be? Is there other ways that we could cut here so that we don't have to put it on the ratepayer? We don't have that in we don't have that right now. Right now, they just pretty much redo the math, and then we all have to suck it up. But if we actually had a working board, they would have to look at all of these other things before it would come to us, and that's something that we would prioritize right away.
Yeah, I mean, just consider, right, that the CNMI is bleeding every year, $50 million every year just for fuel for CUC. And it is about time that we move the Commonwealth into the 21st century and invest in renewables. We need to update our energy action plan. We need to update our renewable energy portfolio standards and set ambitious targets. We can realize a clean energy future in the Commonwealth. And some of the greatest examples, I think, come from small islands that have become 100% renewable. That's possible, especially for communities like Tinian and Rhoda. We can make that happen, and that will be one of our infrastructure priorities in the Sablan Staffler administration.
Thank you, candidates. Are there any follow-up questions?
In reference to wanting to have drinkable water, what about the cost to consumers in having this drinkable water? How can you assure costs will be affordable?
That's a great question. And going back to the $100 million that Congressman Kilili helped secure for clean water, clean drinkable water, these are investments in our infrastructure that mean on the other side, right, that it won't be cost absorbed by local ratepayers. Because you're right, that's $100 million that we won't be paying as CUC ratepayers, but these are investments in building up this infrastructure, right? There are CUC and its engineers and working in concert with EPA. There are plans, there are all kinds of projects that would also improve efficiency of operations on the water and wastewater side. And we need to invest in these projects to make clean drinkable water a reality. One other thing I want to note is that CUC has been under these federal stipulated orders for many, many years now, because we have been failing to meet federal mandates for providing clean, drinkable water to our people. And there are very critical technical positions that we have high turnover in, that we need to fill in order to meet these mandates. And that will be really important for us to prioritize in the Sablan Staffler administration. Those key engineers and other technical positions would be really important to making sure that we have a more efficient operation and that ratepayers aren't absorbing more costs than they have to.
Thank you, candidates. We will now move on to the next question pertaining to miscellaneous.
Candidates, the question is, there will be a bottleneck effect on job placement in the near future. What are your plans in reintroducing the retirement program for government employees so we don't hold the jobs for our future generations? You have 4 minutes. Your time starts now.
For reintroducing the retirement. Well, we're not quite out of the woods yet with the defined benefit plan and the settlement fund. This is a huge, huge obligation for the CNMI government at this time. And making sure that we fulfill our moral and legal obligations to CNMI government retirees who are part of the settlement fund and part of that defined benefit plan, which is now closed, will be a priority for us in all future appropriations and in our administration. Now, having said that, we also recognize that active employees need to have retirement security too. And we are, at least now, we are finally part of the Social Security program. We are contributing to that. But Social Security really isn't enough. And there is the option now, the defined contribution plan, which is like a 401k that active employees can contribute to and draw from when they are ready for retirement. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't sign up for that. A lot of people don't have this little nest egg that they're building for the future. And that should be a concern to all of us, right? Is where is this community going to be as our active employees age out into their retirement years? What kind of security will they have? So what we will push for, this will require some legislation, but we can make some enhancements to the defined contribution program, which would include, for example, automatic enrollment, which is, it seems so simple, it's kind of a no-brainer, but we don't have, it's not automatic yet. And there have been studies from other defined contribution plans around the states that have shown that if you automatically enroll somebody, they're not going to bother to opt out when they're already in, right? And then also to provide people with a tiered contribution structure. Right now, they have to pay in 10%, and that's a big chunk for a lot of people. But if you have other options for what the employee will contribute and you incentivize higher contributions on the employer side, you're likelier to keep people in the system and help them grow their nest eggs so that they do have security when they're ready to retire, on top of any other investments they may have, on top of Social Security. Did you want to talk about financial literacy and counseling? Okay.
Sure. Well, I guess while I was an administrator at PSS, I often would have to look at the personnel's sheets and notice that the majority of my employees were not enrolled in the program, and that was a concern, like she said. And so one of the things I was proactive about is making sure that I brought them there, the defined contribution entities, to get people to sign up. But again, if we were to get them signed up automatically, that would be better. Also, having a tiered program would be good too, because the maximum now, or a person has to put in 10% in order to get the government 4%. But if we could make it that tiered way, it would give people more options so that they could invest more when they were able to and invest less if they couldn't. And making sure that we provide education for our vast employees that will be in the government is something that we would do differently than what I'm seeing happen right now. I don't think many people even realize that this program is happening anymore, because they really only promoted this right at the beginning when the rollovers were happening. After that, it was kind of like you're on your own. But I think active education for a lot of different things, once and done is never enough. You got to do things more often. And so I would make sure that we would have more access to training people on how, what these options are, and how they can also take advantage and take control of their financial futures.
Thank you, candidates. Does the table have any follow-up questions? All right.
Thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts with our student body and community. We will now start with the closing statements of the candidates. You will have 3 minutes for your closing statement. Candidates, you may now present your closing statements.
I want to thank everyone here for the time that you've given us to hear us out, hear our ideas, and for your very thought-provoking questions. This is such an important election. We say it all the time. And the opportunity that we see here is the opportunity to dream big for ourselves, for our families, for the future of our Commonwealth. Let's dream big. We have so many problems, don't get me wrong. We know what those problems are. We know we are facing an uncertain economic future. We know that we have huge problems with public funds being abused, with waste and fraud and straight up corruption again. And these things have really brought shame on all of us as a community, but we have a choice. We have a choice to change course. Leila and I are running for governor and lieutenant governor to lead these islands to a brighter and more hopeful future, to lead these islands to the good governance that you deserve. We love our islands, just like you do. And we know the potential of this place, we know the potential of our people, and we have tremendous resources, including lots of human talent that we will invest in if given the chance. In the education and health of our people, and the infrastructure that we all depend on and that we all need to succeed. When we say that the time for change is now, the change that we're talking about is good governance. It's fairness and honesty. It's fiscal responsibility, economic development that is truly for the people, that lifts people out of poverty and creates these pathways for everyone to thrive. And I wanted to ask all of us, let's dream big. Let's imagine that we can have excellent schools and a hospital that provides services right here on island so that we don't have to go off island for care. Let's imagine equitable opportunities for everyone seeking employment and a decent and honorable living, whether it's in the private sector or the public sector. Let's imagine beautiful, clean, and orderly islands and a government that is worthy of your trust. It really starts with good governance, and good governance will begin with your vote. people like to say that the youth are the future. The youth are actually the present. The young voters of the Commonwealth are by far the largest group of the voting population of the CNMI, and you can be the margin of difference that sets the Commonwealth on the path to the change that we need. Leila and I are number 1 on the ballot, and we ask for your support.
Thank you, candidates.
Thank you.
I'd like to close this forum by thanking all of the candidates and NMC students for their participation in our town hall forum. I'd also like to thank all of our volunteers for serving this event, as well as the NMC IT team for setting up the live stream. All of your efforts and contributions to this event is greatly appreciated. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night.